Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Aditi, the founder of Raising World Children and the author of Strong Roots Have No Fear, an award-winning best-selling book about how we can help our children have strong identities so that they can know how to confront and deal with the world around them. Aditi, would you mind explaining to us a little bit how you were drawn into this work, about your background and what led you to write about these kinds of things?
Thank you for having me, firstly, Vanessa. I am so glad to come on your platform, which is a beautiful one, raising awareness about diversity, which is what I aim to do with what I do. I am an Indian raised in Kuwait. So when my kids started having a little bit of pushback on why we are Indian in heritage versus American, so I realized and I was writing about the challenges on my personal blog, and I realized I need a platform where we have a lot of people come together and talk about this, because we do need to be talking about the issues we all are facing, be it picky eating, which is culturally everyone faces, or be it about having your kids learn languages, which is again something a lot of people face. So which is what led to Raising World Children. And the, the book is just an extension of what I have done. It is a collection of my best work, you could say, where my pieces that pretty much people enjoyed the most. I hoped to give people a friend which they could carry with them and not feel so alone on the journey of raising multicultural children.
You mention a lot in your book about growing up, and you call yourself the girl from nowhere. What can you talk about what that was like, and maybe how that influenced how you raise your own children?
Oh, yes. So when I was growing up, I used to be asking for translations all the time. I am bilingual, but most people around me are multilingual. So I can speak Hindi and English, whereas people around me could speak also Marathi or Gujarati or different languages. And all through my life, I'll be like, oh no, translate it or translate it. Also, growing up in Kuwait, I realized very early on in life, and I mentioned this whole why it happened in the book, where I realized that I am not Indian in my mentality. So and even now, when I see a lot of Indians who are drawn towards people who speak their own language, or have lived in the state or city or whatever, I am drawn to people who have had a diverse upbringing themselves. Like maybe they were raised in a certain state and then went on to living in another place. I used to feel not be able to fit, because Indians per se prefer to connect with people who have have a similar thread, which I think is a very universal thing. But since I was growing up in the Indian community, I used to feel very out of place, because I wouldn't understand why the caste was important, or why your language was important, or why where my parents lived was important growing up, because they grew up, they're in Kuwait now. So, what difference does it make? So I used to feel very out of place. And I realized when my kids were growing up that I'm sure, because like I often say, that we are all human and we pretty much feel all the same emotions. And our children are growing up in a world where it is very easy for someone to be lost in their identity, to not be sure of where they are. Even though I have said this a lot, that even though I have had the feeling of not belonging, I was never confused about who I am as a person, which are two very different things when you actually think about it. People confuse them a lot, but if you have a strong value system, the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter. Because as long as you're a good human being and you have the capability of working through any problem, and are equipped to make good choices, which is what a lot of my book aims at in the first beginning chapters, is and then the identity gets formed around this core, and that is what led me to what we were doing.
That's a very interesting point, because I feel like that's not something we usually include in this conversation. We usually start with accepting of other people and other values, and not with you need to have a good foundation and know who you are and what you stand for. That's a very a very good point. So how are you instilling those values then in your own children?
Well, you would have to read the book. Because that is like pretty much
The whole
every
thing.
chapter is, yes, because because I learned very early on through the research I used to do, because I'm a voracious reader. So a lot of books would say that five a child develops their base personality within the first 5 years, and then everything else is pretty much what their experiences and how they behave is different, but their core value system gets developed in the first 5 years. So you do a lot of conversations. I think those are the most important part about. I'm a huge I'm forgetting the word, but person who believes in having conversations around every single thing you do, because that was something my mother always did with me, is to make sure that I knew what lesson to take away from what we are doing. So she would be like, okay, you watched a movie, so what do you take away from it? So you had this experience, what do you take away from it? So I think the most important thing that I could say in a nutshell is that make sure you have your conversations, take the time out, because a lot of us are very guilty these days of not having the time to have those conversations, which are very important for children growing up, because they are curious. Sorry. They are very curious by nature, and they're always wanting to know why. Even if I'm put given a consequence, you should teach your child that about why are you getting that consequence. Don't just make them stand in a corner. Oh, you did this, go stand in a corner. Why? The whys are very important, to explain to your kids, because even like a simple thing like, why you choose to spend money on something and not something else. People do it, they think the children are watching, and that's pretty much fine. But you need to explain to the child in words about why it is you're doing it, why something might be more of value in experience versus just buying something which might be $14, whereas going to a festival might be the same amount of money, but it would be a better thing to do. So that, I think the main thing that I do a lot of is have those important conversations, which is why the book is full of talking points wherein you can discuss with your kids about everything, be it dealing with tragedy or bullying or friendships or self-identity, racial identity, cultural awareness, and all that good stuff that forms their base core.
It is very good stuff, and you should read the book if you're watching this. So I know from personal experience that it's very difficult to raise a child in two cultures. How are you raising your children in the U.S. as Americans, but also as Indians at the same time? How do you make that balance work?
Well, I think the most important things are food and celebrations, right? Because I find a lot of people miss out on the simple fact of what celebrations bring to a child's life. It is not just the fun of it; it's the lessons in it. Uh, so, in my house, we celebrate Independence Day of India as well as Republic Day of India and July 4th with equal aplomb. We celebrate Christmas with as much of joy as we do Diwali. So it is just unfortunate. I guess we have a lot more Indian festivals than American, but yes, we try to do. We even celebrate Chinese festivals and other things just so my kids get an experience of our stuff. But most importantly, very early on in life, I have started telling my children that you are not half Indian and half American. You're completely Indian and you're completely American. You could say a little bit of Kuwaiti because I was raised in Kuwait, but there's not much of, other than food, there's not much of that exposure to us, our family. But I feel a lot of people give that confusing message to their children that you're half this and half that, which is what makes a child feel that, oh, I need to choose one to stand tall for. So my son often asks me, like, so what if there's a match between India and US? Who should I root for? This he asked me quite a few times because he keeps forgetting the answer that I give him. But I'll tell him, I said, you root for both, and then let the best fan win, because you are both. You can't say that I'm not this and I'm not that. You have to every person has to do whatever they are meant to do. And in the end, you just have to go with whatever is happened with, as fate needs it to happen. So yeah, that's what I hope for the kids to learn about being American and Indian.
That's a good way to look at it, and it is, yeah, I can see how that would be less confusing than this is your American side and this is this side and this. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I'm gonna steal that. I like that.
Yes, everyone I tell this to steal it, but I'm so happy that everyone chooses to. Please, everyone steal it. Tell your kids that they don't need to be confused. I don't know if you know this. There's a term that a lot of Indians use: American born confused desi. I don't know if you know desi means Indian.
No, okay.
So in Indian and Hindi, so they'll be like, oh, if a person is American born, they're going to be confused for sure. But why do you assume your child is confused? They know who they are. They're
Mm-hmm.
not American or just Indian. They are the person that, with the name. They have a lot of qualities. They have talent. They have opinions, and they are this thing also. So I don't know why we all make our kids choose, or by a very weird kind of pressure that hey, you know what, you need to be one or the other. You're everything you want to be.
Right. You can mix it all together and create your own culture and
Yes,
identity, which is
yes,
ultimately what happens anyway.
right.
So, what to back up a little bit, what does it mean to raise a world child? What is raising world children?
Well, as divided as we are currently around the world in a lot of places, I feel it is more important for us all as a generation to remember that we are raising kids together. Our kids are going to go into the world and be friends with each other, hopefully. So it should, I feel that it's very unfortunate nowadays when you go to a place and people are like, oh, that if this thing is happening between the kids, I'm not going to get involved, you know? So, or like, someone comes to your house and they're like, oh, I behave like this in my house, and then you put up with it because you think you don't have a voice. But hey, you know what? You do have a voice, because any child who's under your observation is your responsibility. I personally feel that if a child comes in my house, I talk to them as if they were my own. I make sure I give them values as much as I can. So not that I'm scolding them, of course, not that I'm like, treating them like, oh, you go stand in the corner. No. But yes, they're jumping on my furniture. I am going to be like, no, get off the furniture. You're not supposed to jump on furniture at all. Oh, I do it in my house. It might be okay with your parents. I'm sorry, it's not okay in our home. And
Mm-hmm.
really, if you jump on furniture, this is what happens. And I'd explain that to them. That's just an example. Or if they're being mean to someone, I'll explain to them why it is like that. That is why I say we are raising world children. Uh, the name comes from the fact that I think that we all are raising children together. Like everyone talks about the village, but the village is everyone around us. You send your kids to school, the teachers are raising them, you send them for classes, the coaches are raising them. And of course, we want our children to be world children wherein they accept all cultures around them. They accept everyone for who they are, as we hope they are accepted as well. So when you want your children to be accepted, I think we need to raise children to know that everyone is equal and everyone has equal rights, and everyone is beautiful in all the diversity they have.
That's very true, and especially with the internet, your village isn't just the people who live around you. Your village could be the kid that they watched on YouTube or
Right,
something that they heard on a
yes,
movie. So that's
right,
very true that we're not isolated to just our community or our family. It's much broader than that. Um,
right.
let's say there's someone watching this that knows absolutely nothing about Indian culture and would like to learn. What would you like them to know? Or where should they find information?
Oh wow. Anything with that? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Uh, well, foods are not just limited to tikka masalas or butter chicken. We have a beautiful base of food which is different per state of India. India has like a lot of states, and every state has sub cuisines. So and the food is not that heavy. So this is great for people who are trying to be live a healthy lifestyle. That Indian food is very healthy if you cook it not with the cream and the cashews and stuff like that. If you just cook basic Indian food. It is very nutritious, because I think that's something that is highly different from American culture, wherein you just steam your food, wherein we add spices to the, even if you boil something or we just like, saute it. So that gives it a lot of flavor. And I think that's a great way to, get your kids to try more foods. Uh, Another thing is that we have many festivals other than Diwali, which is the main one in the Hindu culture being Holi, wherein you put colors on each other. Like nowadays, you have color runs in America. I think that's come from India actually, wherein you throw colors on each other. And I think the beauty of that is we are, and that day is said, we say that even enemies put colors on each other. So that's a beautiful day to remove all hatred or malice from your heart. Then we have a lot of festivals that begin from the month of almost August. They go by the Hindu calendar, which is different from the traditional calendar. So it goes reverse or forward depending on the year. So the festivals are not just on one day; they keep moving all year round. Not all year, sorry, between August and November, pretty much. So they move front or they move back. So we have festivals like Janmashtami, Onam, Vishu, I think. I'm forgetting. These are all South Indian festivals. I sometimes myself get confused. And then there's Ganpati, where you pray to the Indian god for 10 days. He's with the elephant head, if you've seen it. It's called Ganpati. So, and then in the end of the festival, you dance all the way to the a water body, and then you immerse it. But nowadays, everyone's environmentally conscious, so people have stopped doing that. They just, take it out and put it back in. But yeah, it's a huge thing for people who believe in that god. People have this is all about, I think, more about Hindu culture, because that's where I, of course, come from. Indian culture is again much more diverse. We have Hindus, we have Sikhs, we have Malayalis, we have Tamilians. So there are all lot of subcultures within the Indian system, and not all of them follow the same religion. So like I'm from the north of India, like by heritage, I'm a Hindu. But there are a lot of people who are from the North India and they are Sikhs, or they are Brahmins, or they are Brahmins are Hindus. Sorry, I'm getting this. Then there are Malayalis who could be Christians as well as Muslims as well as Hindus, or they could be Tamilians who could be Hindus or Christians. So it's a lot of mix. So there's a lot of diversity within India itself, which is one of the biggest reasons India is one of the most diverse cultures within itself, per se, because there are millions of different kind of foods. Like if you walking down the street in India, you will are sure to be regaled with 1,000 different smells, because there are tiny shops and every single one cooks a different kind of food. So I think there's so much more. Yes, but yeah.
Thank you, though. That was a very good introduction. That's
Yes,
very helpful. And there's a lot. It's difficult to describe an entire
yes.
population in 5 minutes or less. So thank you.
Well, and of course, dancing is a huge part. So don't forget that. We love our dancing. We have different classical dances, and of course, the Bollywood dance, as you call. I mean, a lot of people generally call it. So yes, that's a huge part of our culture.
Great, wonderful. So you mentioned a couple of things that you do with your kids to teach them about other cultures and embrace other parts of the world, like different traditions. Is there anything else that you do with your family to help them become world children and help them embrace the diversity around them?
Read books. We read a lot of books. My kids, my son loves nonfiction more. My daughter likes to read princess stories. So we try to find uh, stories which have diverse characters in them. So yes, and we try to volunteer as much as we can, uh, whatever time allows us, so that they get to meet different kind of people and they realize that the world is bigger than just our a shell. Because unfortunately, with the scenario that we have currently, kids are back to back in classes a lot of times, and then they don't have time to just explore the world per se. So just like going to the mall and having nothing to do for 2 hours, that's something like people go to the mall and then they have this tug tug tug. We have to go to these number of shops and do this work. But if you're just sitting there for 1.5 hour and having a cup of coffee, and the kids are playing with 10 different families. That's a huge experience to have. Like, they don't have a purpose. The purpose is just to interact and just to have fun. And I think that's like a huge impact on them, because they see that, oh, everyone's nice.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's very true. Simple things that anybody can do. Yes. Well,
Right.
thank you very much for joining us. And I will make sure that there are links below so that they can find Raising World Children and
Thank
also
you.
your book, Strong Roots Have
Thank
No
you.
Fear.
Thank
And
you.
that way you can all find out more about Aditi and what she's doing. But thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.